Okay, thank you very much everyone for coming. Welcome to this session that we're running here on streaming live events, how to get it right. Hopefully we're going to teach you a lot of things that answer that question today. My name is Ben Barnard, I'm the Regional Manager for AVIXA UK and Ireland with the Audiovisual Experience and Integrated Association. If you have any questions about AVIXA, please come and visit me after the session and I'll be able to answer any questions that you've got. Speaking of questions, there will be a microphone that our friend Michael here has at the back. So if you have any questions, just put your hand up. You're more than welcome to do that during the session as well, if you have a burning question. But if not, then if you wait till the end, we'll give about 5-10 minutes afterwards for questions as well. But without further ado, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the discussion. So first of all, we have Abby Hemingway.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Abby. I've been producing live streams of live events for over 20 years. I'm Chief Commercial Officer of a company called JACKSHOOT. We're a tiny but mighty plug-in to an event or a broadcast that will get your event online, quite simply.
Thank you very much. And Chris Crichlow.
Ben, thanks. Morning everyone, I'm Chris. I'm currently Global AV and Events Manager at Deliveroo. World's foremost food company, I guess, trying to plug that one in. But I've been in the AV and broadcast industry for about 15, 16 years. Done everything from pushing boxes and pulling cable through to directing all sorts of international multi-camera, multi-site, funky things. Worked both client and production partner side. So yeah, interesting blend of experience over the years.
Thank you very much. And Dwayne.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dwayne Fontaine. I've got experience in broadcast and AV over 15 years. I worked as an engineer for many of the biggest broadcasters, and I'm currently a founder of an AI captioning startup.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to let the editors have a little moment here while we grab some water.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
I mean, it's bad for continuity, but let's take them off the table. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to our panelists. Thank you to everyone here for joining us. So the question of the subject is streaming live events and how to get it right. I suppose the first thing to ask is, when you're approaching a streaming opportunity for an event, what are the questions that you ask yourself? How do you actually approach it as a whole, really from the get-go? Abby, what would you say?
Well, I'd really like to take a show of hands if that's okay. Has everyone here streamed an event before, or are we looking at people who haven't streamed? So everyone's streamed an event. Has anyone streamed an event that's gone wrong? Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
And we have a couple of people who also haven't streamed before as well. So
some haven't streamed, some have streamed and it's gone really well, some have streamed and it's not gone quite well.
Seems like half the people have, half haven't, but those that have, for most of them it went wrong.
Well, you can include me in that as well.
Yeah,
so we've all got the scars,
Yeah.
and they do cut deep. I don't know, there's something about live going wrong that does really cut deep.
yeah, it does.
Okay, so the main question to ask if you're looking at streaming the event is why. What are the stakeholders looking to achieve? Is it to just extend the name of the event, the name of the brand involved in the event, or is there a significant reason to engage an audience online? Is it interactive? Is it something you're trying to sell? So the underlying question is why? What are you looking to achieve?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think once you've understood why, spending as much time as you can preparing for it is the greatest thing that you can do. There's nothing worse than assuming, oh yes, my venue already has an internet connection because I'm in London. No, chances are if you're going to a big production house or a large venue like this, it's going to cost you 10 grand for a network drop. So these are things you need to consider and not wait until the last minute. The age-old saying, right? Failing to prepare and you will prepare to fail.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add to that is just test. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. And in terms of the scope of live events, I think a lot of people can look at something and say, right, I need to stream this thing. So it is kind of one size fits all. That's really not the case, right? You've got a whole spectrum of events. Can you give us just a flavour of the kind of events you've been involved with, the actual spectrum, and then what the the differences are when it comes to preparing, hidden surprises, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. At my time, I was recently at TikTok where I was head of production and broadcast, and some of the variety of events that we worked on over my tenure there was insane. An example of the different lens of preparation would be working on a branded partnership with LS, the sports brand, and Zara Larsson, we did the first like e-commerce live music like live stream with her as the artist on the platform. We're working with a product team that hasn't worked out all their bugs on their e-com tool. The RTMP tool at TikTok at that time was still janky and all sorts of like full of all sorts of mistakes.
That is janky, definitely. I remember that. Yeah.
But you know, they then had the bright idea that they wanted to shoot the live show in extended reality. So we're now working in an XR volume, like with. You know, I think we had 12 weeks of prep to get all of the content and graphics rendered, and then, you know, a very funny tour manager and brand partner, and they were nitpicking every single element. Like, people aren't thinking, oh yeah, it's a disguise server, it's going to take time to re-render that stuff. We were re-rendering the morning of, like, you know, 4 hours to live, and like people are still re-rendering content, which is not a place you want to be in. So when we talk about things to prepare for and things to consider, you know, if you know that you're going to be doing something that's heavily content-led, prepare and try and get it done early, maybe. Set appropriate timelines and cutoffs so that your talent is prepared. You aren't going to experience fails. And we did have a fail on the day. Like, I'm even happy to admit that. Like, you know, half an hour before live, both disguise servers crashed and completely died. So we were in a position where we were unable to start at the time that we needed to. Yes, the show went off, but that was an example of, you know, failing to prepare and then preparing to fail.
I think, you know, to the other end of the spectrum, you know, we could stream from the camera at the back of the room now if we wanted to, and that's very straightforward. Does it give the audience a real flavour of the event? Well, I think in this case it's probably quite enough. But if you've got any kind of, you know, show, or, you know, you're trying to make your clients look good, then a single camera at the back of the room probably isn't going to cut it for the audience. So, you know, once you're into multicam, once you're into multi-site, once you're into multi-platform, you know, those are the kinds of events that start getting out of control very quickly unless you've got a team that know what they're doing. That said, you know, you can stream to hundreds of platforms at once. You can stream in different languages at once. Ask Dwayne. But you can add accessibility to your live stream, so you can have live audio description, obviously live captions. You know, so it should never be a single camera stream, if I'm honest. If you can do anything more than that, then I think you're just going to double and triple and quadruple your audience enjoyment of the event, and therefore, presumably, you know, the return on investment is going to be better. You get more eyeballs on the content. You might even sell some products through the content, as Chris was doing at TikTok. And surely it needs to wash its own face, otherwise it's kind of academic doing it, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, sorry.
I would just say, I can't even got much more to add to that, really. I would just say, you know, you can use one camera and use something simple as a HDMI capture card and OBS, or you can use, you know, more high-end encoders or something a bit cheaper in between. But I would say having one camera is quite boring for the audience. At least want to have two or three just to keep the audience, you know, eyeballs interested, because the same single shot is not very interesting for the whole event.
A couple of things that came up just out of that we were talking about there. In terms of a sort of drop-dead deadlines when it comes to client asks, obviously it's important to have as much lead time as possible. So, you know, as you say, if it's heavily content-led, you know, you just need to give them those deadlines because they can create that content before the thing. And in terms of actually managing expectations, though, what are the kind of things where they come to you last minute and say, like experiences where you say, can you do this? And you obviously want to please them as the provider of the service. You want to please them, but at what point do you just have to say, I cannot do that? And how important is it to do that to sort of manage the relationship with the client and make sure the event goes well? Because obviously you don't want them to give you a thumb drive at the last second and then you try and cram it in and it just looks awful. You'd much better just say, yeah. I'm sorry, that's out of the question.
I think it depends on what tools you choose at the start
I
as
was
well.
just gonna say,
if you've got more flexible tools, like say something like a software-based vision mixer compared to a hardware one, then you can probably do more, turn around things quicker. It depends how you build your workflow. You might build your workflow to be more redundant and more flexible. So it's a difficult question. I think Abby's more of a. I'm just an engineer really, so Abby's got more of the that kind of side.
I would never put my brand at risk, let alone the client's brand. So if I suspect that something they're asking us to do is not going to work, I'm very comfortable saying no. you're going to scramble it together for them, then yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, I agree. Like I'm in both positions here. I know people are last minute, and nobody ever works to deadlines. Particularly brand partners who aren't familiar with doing this regularly. Production people, we all understand milestones, deadlines, and in our brains we're like, this is the critical point of failure. If we don't get it together, it's going to fall to absolute cack. But we all understand that brand partners are going to go, ooh, can we just? And I build for those eventualities. I'm in an interesting place because, again, having also been on the delivery side and then client side, I also have my own internal stakeholders. So I'm just further up in the chain. It's like I'm still delivering on behalf of my marketing team, my music team, whoever it is I'm working with. Again, they're going to come with those last-minute requests, regardless of which way you slice it. So my advice in those scenarios would be build flexibly wherever possible, enable your workflows, but also, to Abby's point, be firm about what the reality of the can we just question looks like.
I often find those are the elements that go wrong first.
Absolutely.
And then you sit there going, why did I say yes? So that's another scar.
Yeah. Been there and done that.
Yeah. I suppose having that sort of agreement beforehand as well, like in the pre-production meetings and all that kind of stuff, where you say, look, we have to agree that you trust that I know what's best for you, your brand, the whole production.
This is kind of where it's at, and also one of the biggest things I would say in communicating in that pre-production process is around the risk acceptance. So here's your critical path timeline, right? Everything from this first meeting that we're having right up until we press the big red button that says go live. Everything in between, here are the cutoff points. If we don't have X by Y, Z is the outcome. And be very, very clear about that, because if people don't hear that, they're gonna spin around. And I'm sure I speak for all parties present here. We've all been burned in the same way before, where you didn't tell me that was gonna happen. Well, I told you it was gonna get a bit funky.
Yeah.
So be very, very clear. Be very prescriptive about the risk acceptance, and make sure that your stakeholder, your client, your partner understands that.
It's a good point about the risk.
Speaking of risk, I think there's another thing that came up that we were actually discussing beforehand as well, which is in terms of building redundancy. So let's say, for example, you want to have a backup camera, a backup server, whatever it might be, but this obviously doubles, possibly even triples the cost. But then you've got the fact that you could buy cheaper stuff, but the fact then is that it's more likely to go wrong because it's on the cheaper end of the spectrum. What, in your experience, is the best course of action if you're looking at a product that's X amount, but then you've got something else which is half the price, so you can get two, but then you increase the risk of it going wrong, but you've got a backup. How do you navigate that sort of decision making in terms of building in a redundancy, and what's been your experience if you have been on both sides of it?
Start from engineering.
From an engineering point of view, I would look at all the power, the networking, the rigid mixers, everything in redundancy. Not just because a lot of times, especially in event base, you get redundancy, which is only part of it. And if something goes wrong, actually the whole thing will still go off. So I would just be really looking from the whole workflow, from the bottom to the top, and make sure everything is redundant. The switches, your cameras, your vision mixer, your graphics units. And, some of them can be software-based, some of them hardware-based. It depends on how you're going to do your workflow, really.
Agreed. I think ultimately you got to find the sweet spot that your stakeholder's budget and your budget is comfortable with. And especially from a commercial perspective, you want to build in redundancy for your clients, but not to the detriment of your entire profit margin. Sometimes, and I'm sure you'd agree, but there are times when you take the hit and you swallow a little bit of redundancy because you know that the success of this show leads to a secured, retained contract. An extra, 10 grand up front in this moment generates 100 grand back.
Yeah.
And one thing I'm going to say, if it's event-based, 8 hours, it's different quality equipment for a 24/7 broadcast. So so that's also a thing to think, because a lot of the stuff, prosumer stuff, probably won't fail in 8 hours, but it's probably not going to do very well for 24/7.
Agreed. So it's, again, trying to find that sweet spot, right? What is it that you're trying to save and, guarantee here?
I'm going to guarantee my crew's sanity by making sure they've got every bit of redundancy that we can possibly throw at them, because they do this day in, day out. And a lot of people do events, clients particularly, once, twice a year, 3 times a year. They're not doing it day in, day out, and they will end up with grey hair if they do, because or know her perhaps, because it's stressful, and if you've
Yep.
got a power outage, a data outage, a camera being an idiot, a line being an idiot, it's just those things that you don't need when someone's like 3 minutes to live and you're
Yep.
like, ah.
And you're concerned about
Let's
what
just go on the backup data. So we will often provide backup data and not tell the client
Yeah.
because they didn't want to pay for it. So we're like, well, we'll make sure we don't have a stressful day at work. But
Yeah, because ultimately, regardless of whether they pay for it or not, they're still going to come back to you. Like, I'm actually having a very active conversation about this internally at Deliveroo right now. There's a project that we're working on, and I presented the solution with all of the appropriate infrastructure, reliability, redundancy that is required for what I'm being asked as a service owner to provide, right? I'll be real, my internal stakeholders looked at the number and went, that's interesting.
what's the cost of it going off, though?
Yeah.
So this is
Exactly.
it. So this is the next thing that I would encourage people to think about. What's the impact of doing nothing? And I would sell that back to whoever your stakeholder is and whoever you're producing the show for, because ultimately they're going to go and say, why do I need to spend 10 grand on that extra network drop? And they go, well, this is why. So
Yeah, let them take it off. We always
Yeah.
present the costs for how we would prefer to do it, and then if they go no backup data, you go on you, fine.
yeah.
And then we bring it anyway, so we don't die. But
Exactly.
then when the main data does go off, if it goes off, you've got the trump card. But
Which tends to happen in hotels, because hotels' networks are atrocious.
yeah.
And there's normally no IT guy to get hold of with at a hotel. So
Anyone with a 24-hour SLA is,
it's
a
like
bad place to rely
It's
on
corporate
providers.
AV SLA, not event SLA or broadcast SLA. So
Yeah.
be wary of hotels.
I think that's really interesting because it's as you say, in those situations, if a client doesn't want to pay for that extra money for the built-in redundancy, you bring it anyway because it's your kind of head
It's your
ultimately
reputation.
on the block, because they're not going to, if something does drop out, you need to have that thing backed
Yeah.
up, and you can always share that information with them afterwards. You can
Yeah,
always say,
absolutely.
look, it dropped out and the thing you didn't pay for, we brought it anyway and it worked.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's perhaps that's just an investment in your own business, your own reputation, so that you get the next
100%.
contract and that equipment eventually pays
Yeah,
for itself.
if people are aware that we're delivering the broadcast, it's clearly not a good look if it goes off, even if it wasn't our fault. And we've had it a number of times, on big broadcast shows where a theatre connection just died in the middle of a shoot.
Oh, yeah,
It
fair.
wasn't live to air, but it was a live section, so it did have an impact. And everyone just looked at us. We're like, it's not our connection.
Yeah, and sort of like doing it at the point where you go, oh, this is going to be really bad, but let's go for it anyway, is basically, it's almost like cutting your own nose off to spite your face, right?
Yeah.
Because then you can't turn around to a client on a live stream and say, I told you. Now everything's dead, everything's gone down, because then you look bad as well. They're never going to use you again
Yeah,
because
well,
they're
yeah.
like, well, you were the expert, we trusted you. It's like, it's a hard one to navigate. I'd like to go back to the sort of like to more the nuts and bolts of events. What's interesting, I think, sometimes is people overlook maybe the differences between on-site and online events. So there are things that we have to sort of look at and things that we need to consider for the online audience, for those kind of things. What are those differences in your mind when you look at an event and you say, right, this was just going to be a kind of a captive audience, now they want to put an online element to it. Okay, these are the things you need to think of.
I would say, sorry to jump in on that, but my brain went back to the conversation we were having around engagement, right? What level of engagement? Why are you doing this? It goes back to the question that Abby asked from the jump. What are you trying to achieve and why are you doing this? Once you've understood that, you then can work out the level of engagement tooling that you can put in. Do you want people to be able to have something as, like Q&A tooling or polling or, live feed coming back in? I don't know, like being able to order a product, whatever it is. Like, what level of engagement are you trying to bring into the mix? And to Dwayne's point, we had a bit of a preamble about this, but the prep around this, I think, is something that people don't really consider, like in terms of like what platform choices.
Yeah,
look like.
yeah. I would say your platform points is important to what you want to do with your event. So I mean, Abby probably has more using the platforms more than I do at the moment, anyway. So she might be able to help you with that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a trade-off, isn't there, between the physical event and the online event, and often that's worth having that conversation way in advance, because if there is an impact on the on-site audience because the online bit isn't ready, or if the online bit is ready, if the on-site bit isn't, how do you tackle that so there's least impact? What we find is that obviously the on-site audience are a lot more forgiving for technical issues, so they can see that the stage is set, they can see that there's nearly panelists or whatever your event is. But the online audience, if they're just looking at stream start soon and that just goes on for 20 minutes, then clearly that's not a great experience. So I think it's just, again, worth having that conversation up front. Which audience gets the priority, if you like? How are we going to tackle any delays? If there is an online catastrophe with whatever part of the workflow, do we still go live on the, in the room? So it's just that trade-off, isn't it? And then if everything's going well, then you just need to build in that into your schedules. So the fact that the stream will probably start a few minutes. But people online love a bit of a can't hear it properly.
The one thing I would say as well, just make sure someone's monitoring the actual online feed. Because a lot of time you go to the event, it sounds great in the room, but it doesn't sound great online because someone doesn't configure something correctly. So it's always good to have some sort of return feed from the online stream to be able to know what's going on.
And I suppose it's a bit like the Uber model of giving the customer as much information as possible. Like they say that's why Uber was so successful, is because you can see the car. It might not arrive exactly on time. You can kind of see the progress. You're constantly given information. In terms of that stream starting soon, but adding that countdown timer, how stressful is that as an organizer, to sort of commit to that kind of thing? Because obviously for the viewer, the long distance viewer, that's gonna give them more confidence because they can see that I've got time to get a cup of tea, I've got time to listen. But for you on the other end,
I can do a countdown. It's the clients that don't, because they're not used to it.
Yeah.
And also, this is once again what software you're using or hardware. If you're using something like a software-based video mixer, then it's a bit easier to kind of change the number halfway through and like go 1 minute to 3 minutes and go,
I've done that. I've also done a countdown to a countdown.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a really good one.
The countdown to the countdown is a lifesaver. Been there and done that. Like, if anybody wants to come and find me afterwards, there's a music artist that cannot be named on stream, unfortunately. But been there, done.
I can name one. Michael Jackson. We did his ticket launch when he was alive, obviously. And he wasn't there for 2 hours. He was supposed to do the press release press conference at 3. We were spinning up some God knows what servers, real player type streaming, hosting. It was costing us a fortune. And he was just in his hotel for 2 hours. Sure. Now, I can't remember the year, but I feel like 2008, 7 before he died. You can imagine the online tools we had to keep the audience updated. There was nothing, and it was just catastrophic to the costs for us. I mean, these days streaming's pretty much free if you use YouTube, but yeah, it wasn't great.
Horrendous back in them days. I mean, I was still in school, but I mean...
Oh, God, you cut me deep. I was only 16.
Yeah.
So keeping engagement, devil's in the detail kind of thing, making sure you have those holding slides. If you've got the guts for it, do a countdown timer, all that kind of thing. Basically, information for the long distance viewer.
Absolutely, and I think PMs whoever's managing that stream or the relationship between the actual event, the client, and the actual delivery of, you've kind of got to be at a point where you call it. Because if you allow clients to continue fiddling and faffing, can we just remember that question? It's gonna come and it's gonna trip you up. I've been there a million times where someone's just like, we're not ready, I've got to touch up our makeup. Stop that. Like, we're already there. Yeah. Like, especially for something trivial, like, you've kind of just got to call it, back everybody off. Hey guys, we're going live in 5. Like, non-negotiable unless the building starts, touch wood, sets on fire or whatever. But, yeah.
I think probably quite an obvious answer to this question, but how important a consideration is latency in these things, and what can affect it, and what are the trade-offs that you can do if you are kind of lacking resources to get the best thing? What are the trade-offs that you can sort of put in place to get as close to the desired product and end product as possible?
I mean, it really depends with latency. I mean, latency for real time is probably under a second, 2 seconds, depending on what you're looking like, kind of like a video conferencing, maybe even less than that. But if you're looking for a HLS stream, don't know if people know what HLS stream is here? No? Okay, the stream that you watch on like a video player, just that would be a HLS stream. Kind of, that's a lot more latency ridden. So like when you're watching football and you've got two screens, it's from the same channel, but they're both behind. That's because the segment size is different. It's a bit geeky, right? So that's a lot more latency. That might be like more like 15 seconds to 30 seconds actually, depending on what flavor you use in the HLS. So it really depends on what part of the stream we're talking about and what you're trying to achieve. If you want something more like video conferencing, then it's a lot lower. Then it's hundreds of milliseconds.
Yeah. 100%. Like, it really does depend on what you're trying to achieve. And I think, again, if you're not looking for two-way communication, the latency almost doesn't matter unless it's something critical like, the election or
auctions.
Oh yeah. Ooh.
Gambling.
Yeah.
Is that then why?
Yeah.
Is that then why often like auctions they'll have people just on the phone rather
Yes.
than like
Yeah.
any like
Yeah.
Is it because of
Yeah,
the
there
latency?
is-
Almost because I mean I was CIS is like one of all the betting shops in the country. I was looking after most of the streams, and so my job was to low the latency between. So we stopped using a traditional streaming protocol and went to more of a web conference protocol to lower the latency down because people were cheating. So. It really depends on what you want and what you're doing it for. Yeah,
You've got protocols like WebRTC and SRT which move like with much lower latency, but RTMPS or HLS, like you're at the higher end of the spectrum. So you kind of just got to think like, and let's not even get started on terrestrial broadcasts, but like, you've got to think about what you're trying to achieve and what the level of engagement and communication is.
Yeah, I'd like to think for the casual live streamer that latency is not usually a problem unless you're auctioning artworks across multiple territories, which I've been on the hook for. Gambling I've not done a lot of, but clearly latency has to be almost zero for that. But for a general brand event, there's not really a big deal for latency. We've had some like award shows that, we're filming it live, the whole thing's delayed, or we're filming it live and they want it to be real time. So when people tweet from the auditorium, it's matching the stream. There's various requirements, but quite often I'd imagine a client's just going to look to you to be like, just get it as low as you can. And then, as to Dwayne and Chris's point, then it's a choice of encoders and platform to reduce the latency to the end viewer. And
in terms of making that sort of making accommodations for it, is it simply a case of looking at something like resolution? So if they want as close to zero latency as possible, but they also want it kind of streamed in 4K.
Yeah, the resolution.
And that's where your determined platform is, your CDN. So if you're going up to YouTube, there's a distribution network before you actually hit the YouTube platform, which then determines the split. It determines how quickly your feed gets onto the platform, how quickly the user sees that. If you're going through an intermediary like Restream, Grabio, or one of those other cloud distribution platforms, there's going to be an additional piece of latency that adds into that. So you've got to really consider all of your hops and consider the pathway of your signal. It gets a bit weird and technical and can get quite granular, so happy to sidebar with anybody on that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely suggest if the client's talking about low latency, then it's time to bring in, people who know what they're doing. Don't try and download the instructions off the internet because it's still innovating, that space. So it's changing all the time, and we're trying to keep on top of all the possibilities.
And for some of the braver people, there are some good open source solutions out there. But I mean, you might need a proper geek to help you out with that. But
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and like there comes a point where like once you've ingested the requirement and understood what it is you're trying to achieve, it stops being a production discussion. It starts being an engineering conversation. So it's really, really important to have your architect or your engineer as part of the conversation as early as possible to help navigate those solutions. Because the last thing you also want is for your engineering team to have not been part of any of this from the beginning. The client says, "I want near to real time as you can get me," and then they're going to come back with, it's going to cost you 20 grand to get.
Yeah, and also another thing to talk about, real-time distribution tends to cost a bit more than HLS distribution, because something like normal HLS distribution can be used on a normal CDN made for websites.
Said earlier, like the starting point of your show and of the online stream just need to be in sync. So you've got one floor manager, one stage manager, whoever it is, calling that. Your show caller, depending on the size of your event, just rehearse it, because make sure everyone's got the right comms. It's like you would any part of the show. It's if you're going to do pyro, you'd rehearse the cues. So it's the same thing really for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that depending on how structured your show is, it's probably worth practicing things like where they're going to walk on from, or where people are going to stand or sit. So your cam ops, like if you've got an establishing shot coming in, right? And this sounds like something really rudimentary, but people actually miss it in the live space because they're only thinking about the iMag, and it's okay if it swings onto an LED wall. It's ridiculous. Like, think about those those pivotal moments, pivotal production moments, and make sure that everybody knows where and when they're happening. And as you say, there's a show caller to get it through. In addition to that, your engineering team should have been rehearsing 6 hours before. From the time that internet connection, the encoder is already set, there's nothing stopping that engineer plugging their laptop in and running a test pattern out of that building to guarantee that network connection is stable, and doing all the fiddly bits. The video PPU and the OB truck, they can still be getting themselves prepped. All of that stuff doesn't matter. That, if you're running a live feed, that person needs to be first person there and getting that thing rolling before anything else begins to happen. Run some tone and a test pattern down your signal pathway and get it out to platform to validate. And also multiple test accounts. If you're working on platforms, make sure you have multiple destinations. You'd be surprised how many times things can get a bit funky and you haven't realized because you've only got one test.
I would say, especially if you're going to bring remote participants into the event, make sure they can hear some part of the comms. A lot of times that doesn't work, or sometimes you need someone else helping get them ready as well if they're going to come in remote.
In terms of hidden costs, presumably if somebody wants to stream an event, they can come to an organisation such as JACKSHOOT or any of you in your former roles, and say this is what I'd like to do, and as the provider you would say, okay, this is the cost, this is the package. If it's not that simple, and if it's someone kind of in-house and they say to their higher up or someone who's looking to generate more revenue from something, they say, hey, we could stream this event. I've seen people do it on Twitch, on YouTube, why don't we just do this? And they say, yeah, go for it. In that sense, what are the kind of hidden costs that you think somebody in that position would run into and that they should be careful about? Assuming the platform is free or a very kind of like £5 a month subscription, then they think, okay, and I can probably use the internet that's in the office, and I can probably do this. Where are they going to get tripped up in terms of extra costs that they would really not be expecting?
You want to take that one?
I think you've already said it. It's the venue connectivity. I mean, literally, so many times I'm expected to do an internet broadcast from a venue with no internet connection. And
or internet's terrible.
Or the internet's terrible.
Yeah,
or the shock on their face when the client realises that they're going to have to pay the 10,000 drop fee or network access fee. And, then they've got a really difficult conversation with their manager. But the venue's already been signed. So that's when it comes down to, well, it's too late to add the live stream in, or we're looking at cellular or satellite connectivity, and they all have a cost,
Yeah.
I thought we'd come out of the internet is free era, but people do still think if it's the internet, it's free.
Yeah.
Still weird.
Yeah, I would say, sell 4G, bonded 4G solutions are still a great way to get out of call. Satellite is still horrendously expensive. I know you've got things
Satellite
like
is huge.
Starlink.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the big national broadcasters, so when you watch a lot of 4K streams for like with football matches, a lot of that has actually gone over 4G now. We stopped using satellites in the OB trucks because it's just too expensive doing 4K distribution.
It's crazy to go out, and when we start thinking about network architecture, like that's a really, really good big call. There's nothing worse than somebody saying, oh yeah, I've worked out of this hotel before and the Wi-Fi is great. We're going to hire the ballroom. Been there and done that. There are way too many London venues where I've just stood there and looked at the sales manager and looked at the client at the same time. I'm like,
Yeah.
The other thing is if the client needs security, any kind of registration or sign-in, the free platforms don't give you a lot of flexibility. They don't give you any data, is the other thing. If clients I want to know everybody and everything about them who has watched our stream, then you're going to need an off-the-shelf platform to take that data in. So those are the kinds of things. If everyone's comfortable with a YouTube stream, then get comfortable with the amount of data you get from YouTube, which is very, very little.
Yeah, agreed. And I would say that the other piece there is also around the cost of delivering that stream, because somebody will say, oh yes, we can just deliver it on Twitch or YouTube we have, I've seen this thing done, but nobody thinks about, the machine that they're going to need to stream from, how they get the cameras into that, what level of stream. We go back to why are we doing this and what are we trying to achieve? What's the look and feel? This isn't, I can't plug 2 webcams in and automatically have a stream of an event. It doesn't work that way. So, well, you can, but it's just going to look cack.
Yeah.
Technical term.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my my mouth fairly clean.
I'm sure they've got a bleep button on the recording. It's fine. So, I mean, we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I'd really like to get some questions in if people have them. But just before we go, how important is it to evaluate the skills that your team have that are working on it, and what kind of skills do they need?
Very important. I would say there's a big, in broadcast and especially AV, the lack of networking skills. The lack of, people, very, very, very poor. I've talked to many engineers, old and young, and everything's on the network now. Especially if you're going to use, I don't know, protocol called NDI. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, yeah? Can be a bit of a headache sometimes, doesn't yet. So, yeah, networking skills, very important.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also really important to balance your teams. There's nothing worse than having, a hell of a lot of video people and 2 audio people and 1 network person or no network people. Balance your teams. Think about who it is, what it is you're trying to do and what it is you're trying to achieve and where you get that expertise from. Don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed. It's really, really painful.
My only addition to that is that just like events people, you can tell that your events people, live people have that intrinsic thing that makes them really like doing live, and you shouldn't be working live unless you have it, because it's a horrible place to be if you don't like it. So I think just on a really broad note, people have to love the live thing, otherwise.
And just keep calm when things go wrong. When everyone's running around screaming, just relax and just fix it.
I always try and break it down to my clients. Until you see me panic, you have nothing to worry about. So
I normally just go quiet and start thinking. So.
Well, yeah, it's just let's go problem solve. I actually can't speak to you for a second. Give me 5 minutes. Let me go knock that out.
We call that the bubble. So that's often my role, to stand around the technical and engineering teams, stop the client asking them really stupid questions at 1 minute to live about the fact that their phone can't download it, and you're like, no, just stop.
Everybody just chill.
You're all on the venue. You're all on the venue internet. None of your phones are going to look at this stream.
Just was absolute mess. Yeah.
And I suppose knowing your capabilities and limitations as well, right? As a team.
Massively. But to Abby's point, it's really important to play defense on your technical teams. I say this as somebody who has operated and has done the defense role. There's nothing worse than somebody asking a stupid question. I don't often say that there are stupid questions,
no,
but
I don't.
in that moment, please. There's nothing relevant that you can ask me right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Do we have any questions? If you do, hands up. Excellent. Michael's going to come around with the microphone. We'll get the headphones on here.
Thank you. So I operate mostly sound and vision mixing for events, mostly corporate, and I learn failures and things like that through experience mainly. An example is, for example, we did a school event in the summer in July, and I was on sound and video, and the school provided a camera, but they spent a whole rehearsal trying to find a charger for it. And they found a battery charger, but no USB charger. And on the second show day, the battery failed, and it was visible on the screen. So we used it for showing on the TV. And so I know the patterns that can lead to a failure like that happening, like equipment failure. Can you advise any other failures to look out for with live video, whether it's hardware or software? Any patterns, like management-wise or just practically, that I should be looking out for next if I'm either just showing video to an audience or streaming it?
I mean, I would ask, how long do we have? The myriad of failures that could occur are plentiful. I would say, first and foremost, think about your resolution and signal pathway. Make sure that everything marries up. There's nothing worse than introducing something that's 60 hertz into a 50 hertz workflow, for example. So using that as an example, I would say alignment is your overarching principle. Think about your Dante networks. Are your network switches appropriately clocked? Is your Rio and your QL1 or whatever consoles you're using, are they addressed properly? So alignment is the general thing. Can everything talk? Can everything play ball?
Good, really. Not much more to say.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? We've probably got time for one more question. And the three of you, are you available for 5-10 minutes afterwards just to chat to
if
people
anyone wants to talk
afterwards?
technical, I'm here.
But yeah, so if anyone has any questions afterwards, come and grab the panelists. But yeah, please.
So we all know you picked the right tool for the right job, but if you could pick the tool before you had the job, what's your go-to, be it platform or piece of kit? What is it that you would love to have or be using before you worry about what the job actually needs? So what's the one platform that you love to use over others, or the one piece of kit that you always like to have if you can get it into a job because it makes your day or your life
I think you're
better?
dealing with anything like SDI, you need upscaler, downscaler, cross converter. I forget the red box, I forget the name of it.
Decimator.
Decimator. It's been a long time since I used a decimator, but yeah, I sold mine recently. But yeah, that's a lovely piece of tool and get you out of kit, because even things like connecting black magic stuff doesn't always like connecting with certain stuff, and even if it's the same registered frame rate, it doesn't even work. Sometimes you just need to put that thing in front of it. So for SDI and that, yeah.
As much as I'm growing to love it, vMix as a software platform, actually it's very flexible and does a bunch of stuff.
Swiss Army knife.
It is, and like I say this as I love hardware. Like I live with Ross routers, but that software platform, and actually there's nothing wrong with a bit of OBS. I'm actually just I'm gonna go out outrightly and say that, but a platform like vMix is very versatile, as is OBS.
I'm going to disagree.
Well, your JACKSHOOT.
I wouldn't put my clients' events through vMix. Now listen, we'll have this conversation afterwards.
You've got the last word as well, because we're out of time. So make it count.
Well, I'm just going to say the horrible truth. Everything's let me down at some point. So whether it's YouTube or TikTok, actually, I don't think TikTok ever let me down, but nearly everything has let me down. So I always have, contingencies to contingencies. There is not one fail-safe key to unlock this, I'm afraid, apart from a really good team.
Agreed. Redundancy. Thank you, everybody.
And I will say hardware vision mixers are still good. It's not so much it's software or hardware. It should never be that conversation. It should be what's the right tool for the right job.
Excellent.
Agreed.
Abby, Chris, Dwayne, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all as well for the questions, and come and chat to us afterwards.